Brian Gomez. I'm the Vice President of Operations for PastPerfect Software Company. I want to thank you for coming, especially here in the States. For those people getting ready to celebrate Thanksgiving, a happy Thanksgiving, and thanks for taking a little bit of time out of your week to spend some time with me and Nomenclature 3. Right from the start here, I have a quick poll to launch to find out how many of you have watched the other webinar that we did regarding this, regarding the nomenclature. So did you get to see it? Yes, I watched it live. Yes, I watched the recording. Or no, I missed it. I appreciate the feedback. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And it looks like about half viewed it live. A few viewed it, watched the recording that's online, and the 46% that missed it. For the 46% that missed it, if you go to museumsoftware.com /techtips.shtml, you can get there by going to, let's see, you go to support and then new video tech tips right here. And if you go there, you'll come to this page where you can then watch the part 1 if you want to go back and view it at a later time. All right, this webinar today is a review of the previous webinar, as well as the opportunity to take and put some of these things into practice with PastPerfect, and in particular PastPerfect version 5. If you're not using PastPerfect version 5, you cannot use Nomenclature 3.0. It's a whole new structure and system that doesn't fit into PastPerfect 4 or before. So for review, let me go through this PowerPoint real quick. There are multiple levels now. You can have 6 levels of descriptive information for an item. The mandatory ones are category, classification, and primary object name. In addition, the new nomenclature also has a subclass, a secondary object name, and a tertiary object name. There is no such thing as an item that has a secondary object name but not a primary object name. So there's nothing in the nomenclature where you would have a secondary name that isn't grouped underneath of a primary name. Think about tables and an end table. A table would be the primary object name. The secondary object name would be an end table. Here's an example of what that looks like. This is found at one of our clients' PastPerfect online sites. It's tools and equipment for materials, food processing and preparation, food preparation equipment, a cooking device, a cooking iron, and it's a waffle iron. Here's another example. This image I did not credit but came from LL Bean. Apparently it's in their catalog. This is a category, furnishings, classification, bedding. Notice there is no subclassification, and its primary name is sleeping bag, or bag, comma, space, sleeping. Part of the point of the new nomenclature is that we can use multiple names to describe an item. So no longer do you have to pick the original or best use of the artifact in order to name it and only get one shot at it. Now PastPerfect has 3 object name fields and even a memo field to keep track of extra object names if you have 7 that fit. When you research by Lexicon, PastPerfect will look across all 3 object name fields for your term. So you don't have to do individual searches in 3 different fields when you name something with 3 different names. And don't forget, PastPerfect has the other name field. The other name field is for the more common or local term that describes the artifact. This is an example we're going to work with today a little bit. In the new nomenclature, I'm sorry, let me back up. In the old nomenclature, we have this keychain flashlight thing from West Point, United States Military Academy. It is in our old nomenclature simply as novelty. We would have cataloged it maybe just as novelty. Now, someone else could say, no, it first was a flashlight before it was a keychain, or whatever you say, it's fine. It just could only have one name in the old nomenclature with PastPerfect, with the earlier versions of PastPerfect. But in the new nomenclature, we're looking at being able to assign multiple object names. And I've lined up all 3 here. Now, it's pure coincidence that these 3 primary names are the highest level of definition. There's no sort of flashlight that's specific to this type of flashlight. The keyring is the most defined term. We don't have secondary or tertiary terms for this item. PastPerfect comes preloaded with both Nomenclature 2, or the revised nomenclature, that's the dark blue cover book, as well as the Nomenclature 3, that's the green covered book. You can switch between the two and do no harm to your records. I say this not because I think it's a good idea to do. I think it can be confusing on what you're looking at if you are switching back and forth between the two. But if you decide to try Nomenclature 3 and then look at it and you say, you know what, it's too complex, we're going back to 2, it's okay. You can switch over and then come back and see what the Nomenclature 2 classification system looks like, or the Nomenclature 3 classification looks like, and it will not affect your records. And the reason for that is PastPerfect does not automatically change your object names ever. We don't, if you classified something as, for instance, a card, comma, space, cabinet, a cabinet card, if you classified that in version 2 of our software, that term is no longer in the new nomenclature. We're not going to change your artifact from card, comma, space, cabinet to photograph, comma, space, cabinet just because we think that's the right term. We're not going to touch it. We're leaving it alone. So you don't have to worry about switching between the two as far as your items getting renamed. One word of caution here is if you've done some major modifications to the nomenclature, like put in your own categories or subcategories or classified a bunch of names that were not in the original nomenclature, they're not going to carry over to the new nomenclature. There's no transition that we can do automatically to say, when John created that category, what he meant for that to do in the new nomenclature would be this. If you need help with that, we can create custom conversion routines to make that happen, but it usually comes at an additional expense. So if you have a really customized database of nomenclature terms that fit your organization's needs, you'll probably need help getting that into the new 6-part nomenclature structure. So we're going to get started, but I wanted to show a picture of an error ratchet. I want to add this to my nomenclature a little bit later, and when I was showing the staff, or telling the staff about how we were going to do this presentation, I mentioned this example, and they all looked at me with a kind of a blank stare on what is an error ratchet. This is a tool, a ratcheting device that runs on compressed air and just makes working as a mechanic a little bit easier. So you're going to see ratchet, comma, space, air added to our process a little bit later. All right, so let me get PastPerfect open here. I'm going to start, and then I have the evaluation loaded up on my computer. And we're going to be using the evaluation today that's available free at the website. If you don't have the evaluation loaded on your computer, you can certainly download it and install it for free. It is a great tool to see how this stuff works before you actually make it happen in your real software. If you need help installing it, give our support office a call. All right, so right now I'm set to use the old nomenclature. And I know that because if I go to Setup and then down to Lexicon, I can see the 3-part system here: category, subcategory, and object name. The other way I can tell, if I go to Setup and down to System Parameters, on the right-hand side of the screen here, I have a Use Nomenclature version 2.0, where I can make the change to select 3.0. Now, I noticed this morning I actually have seen an error happen a couple of times here when I've been switching back and forth between the two. That error is not major, but it is kind of an annoyance. So if we see it today, I apologize. I'm going to click on Exit here and go back into my Objects catalog. And you can see my novelty flashlight cataloged here. And just something quickly I put together with an FIC number, the first item I found in my collection in 2012. I gave it an object name of novelty, which fits the nomenclature. And down here in Lexicon, tab over here to the left, I have novelty. It's a communication artifact, and it's advertising medium. All right. So that's how it's cataloged in Nomenclature 2.0. We only have one object name field. It's located in the top part of this screen. And to find out what part of the nomenclature it's classified in, we have to look at this location tab, or the location button on the sidebar. If I exit from here, to set to Nomenclature 3, I need to go to Setup, and then System Parameters, and change that setting from 2.0 to 3.0. After I make that change, I click on Exit, and it tells me, because we've changed the nomenclature version, you must reindex from the main menu to complete the change. So if we exit from here, click on Reindex. I'm going to check everything. This could take a while on those organizations that have tens of thousands of records, but it will not take very long at all with our evaluation copy. Okay, it's taking longer than I thought it would. All right. So once this finishes up here, the next thing we're going to go in is we're going to go in and look at that object record again. So now, from the objects screen, we see that it is still called a novelty. We didn't make a change to the data, the data about this flashlight here in your record. But if we take a look under Lexicon, you can see that we have novelty is an unclassified artifact, and it's a need to classify. Down in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see the legacy information of what Nomenclature 2 had held, or the revised nomenclature had held about this item. To make a change now, we know that the term novelty was removed from the nomenclature, and it was replaced with several different terms. One of the terms that we're going to be using here is that it's a souvenir. It's a souvenir from West Point. There's a number of ways to make the change. If I click on Edit, I can go in here and simply type souvenir. I do have to spell it right, though. All right. And if I click on Save, you'll notice that when I clicked on Save, it automatically populated the hierarchy where it found the term souvenir. So because souvenir only shows up once in the nomenclature, and every term only shows up once in the nomenclature for for the new nomenclature, each term can only show up once. It knows, PastPerfect knows where to put that term, so put it in properly as a primary object name. It's under the subclass of memorabilia in the classification documentary artifacts in the category communication artifacts. But the beauty of Nomenclature 3.0 is that I don't have to stop here. I can also name this thing as a flashlight. So if I click on Edit again, and this time instead of typing in what the object name is as a flashlight, I click on the binoculars button here, and it allows me two different ways to search for the object name I want to use. One is to use this structure where I'm selecting the category classification first, and the other is by alphabetical. So if I click on alphabetical and then single click on any one of these object names on the left, I can type in, if I type quickly, F-L-A-S-H, and I get to flash. If I type slow, it will go F, and then take me to the L's, and then take me to the A's. But if I type fast, I get right to flash. And then I can look down here to flashlight. If I click on that, I can see that a flashlight is actually classified, which I never would have found it, under furnishings, lighting equipment, lighting devices. Also a primary object name of flashlight. That's what I want, so I'm going to double click on it, and then select as object name. It brings it across as my second object name. And the third name that we use for this flashlight souvenir thing is also a keyring. And keyring, I know, is a personal artifact. So I'm going to look for that a different way. Instead of doing the alphabetical search, I'm going to go first down to selecting the category. Number 3, personal artifacts. And then the classification, personal gear. Now, even if I didn't know what my sub-classification was, I could just scroll down through here and look for the item. But because I know that it's personal carrying and storage gear, I can click on that. It will decrease my list even further, and then I can select my ring, comma, space key. So there we go. So here's ring key. I can double click on it and select as object name. Now I have all 3 terms in here as my souvenir, flashlight, that's also a key ring. Now I said novelty had left the nomenclature, but one thing that is in the nomenclature is novelty, comma, space, promotional. So as something that might be given out at a trade show or something like that. And if I decided that this could be also that item, it could also be a promotional item, I might fill out this other object names field with those other terms. That way keyword searching could also find the additional names that this might have. When we first talked about creating PastPerfect 5 with the new nomenclature, we had to make a decision on what the maximum number of object names could be. And we chose 3 because of how they fit on the screen. So if you do have additional names, put them in other object names using nomenclature format, and it will make things easier to find in the future. So we did our selection from alphabetical as well as doing it from selecting the hierarchy of the catalogs. Once we're done editing and saving, or editing the records here, we want to click on Save. And then I want to show you how we can do research using the new nomenclature. So once we've got our item in here as a key ring, I'm going to go ahead and exit out of here and go to Research by Lexicon. And it looks just like our selection screen, where we can go in and select our category, classification, or subclassification. Or I could simply do the alphabetical listing and look for all of the flashlights I have. So I'm going to double click on flashlight, and you'll see my one item is my souvenir flashlight that comes up as my search result. If I double click on that, it will take me right to the record. All right, there's another button back here on the Lexicon screen we didn't talk about. So if I click on the Lexicon subscreen by clicking on that sidebar button and take a look at the folder icon here, if you click on that, it'll bring up additional information about the object name souvenir. It'll tell it where it came from in the category, subcategory, but also say where the information came from out of the nomenclature. So if it was not part of the original nomenclature, or if it had additional notes in the original nomenclature, you'll see that information here. We expect to expand the use of this screen a little bit more later as revisions to the nomenclature are made and we receive them electronically. So it could be a clue. There is not, as far as I know, any sort of key that would tell you exactly what each term in the nomenclature is. As far as I know, one doesn't exist. That said, let me take you to the website real quick. If you do have questions about what a term is supposed to be used for, this website here, aaslhcommunity.org/nomenclature, is a great place to ask those questions, whether you're going into the forum or submitting it through submission or contact us. So this is a great place to go if you have questions about what is this thing, what is it called. A lot of people take photographs of things and say, does anyone know what this is? And a lot of great feedback comes out of the community from that. All right, so I showed earlier that air ratchet. Let me go back into PastPerfect now. that air ratchet is not in the nomenclature. The closest thing we have in the nomenclature is ratchet. Let me go show you that. So if I go into research, a couple of different ways to see this. I can do research by lexicon, or I could go to setup and lexicon. Both will allow me to get into a place where I can view the nomenclature or view the lexicon. I'm going to go to research by lexicon and do a alphabetical search and then type in ratchet. So R-A-T-C-H, there we go, ratchet. Right now, all we have is a term of ratchet. If I could double-click on this to check my database, but I know I don't have any ratchets in there. I want to add the term ratchet to my nomenclature. Well, searching is not the place to add it. In order to add a term to the nomenclature, you're going to want to go to Setup, and then Lexicon. And then down toward the bottom of the screen, you have Add Category, Class, or Term. If you click on that button, it will open up the screen to allow you to say, I want to add a category. This would be if you're totally revising how the nomenclature works. You want to add a category number 14 for medical instruments of unknown origin or something that's really specific to your collection. You would start by adding the major category and work your way down. Because we want to add a secondary object name, this secondary object name, I know it's a secondary object name because I know a ratchet is a primary object name. Now, forgive me, I'm kind of going fast here, but I looked this up ahead of time before we started the webinar. There's a Category 5, which is Tools and Equipment for Science and Technology. There's a classification for that for Mechanical Tools and Equipment. There's a subclassification for Mechanical Devices. And the primary term is ratchet, R-A-T-C-H-E-T. I would like to go, because I'm, say, a tool museum, I would like to have more items in my nomenclature that are more specific. And the secondary term that I'd like to add is air ratchet, or ratchet, space, air. When I click on this Add Secondary Term, you'll see that the field goes white here, so I can type into it. But I also have a field at the top that was selected as soon as I clicked on that allows me a drop-down. That drop-down allows me to select which category I want this air ratchet to go into. Now, I said if you were like a medical museum that was going to specially catalog or create its own lexicon of the instruments, you would start by adding a category, because if you tried just adding a term, you wouldn't have a category listed here to go into. So first thing I'm going to do is select Category 5. Second thing, select the classification, and this is Mechanical Tools and Equipment. Go down to Subclassification. This is Mechanical Devices. The primary term, I'm going to look for ratchet. And then my secondary term, there's no pull down because this is what I'm adding. It's going to be ratchet, space, air. So when I click on Add New Secondary Term, are you sure you want to add it? Click on OK. It gives me the opportunity to fill out some of that additional screen. Remember that folder icon I showed you that had the information about where the source is, what the definition of notes? It also says what changes. It says there's a user adding this on this state. So I can make notes in here. Please use this when the ratchet is to be used, or when the ratchet is powered by air and fits a certain criteria. So you can get really defined, if you want, on your own nomenclature creation. And then source, I could put in my own name here if I wanted to. I'm going to just click on OK, and it's added that term. So I still don't have any ratchets in my collection, but you'll know that term is there if you go to Research by Lexicon and go to the, you could follow through here with 5, and then the Mechanical T&E, and then the Mechanical Devices. And as I work my way down to R's, You've got a regular ratchet, which is defined at the primary level, or you have an air ratchet, which is defined one level down. All right, so that is showing how to add a ratchet. Now, for most of us, when we migrate from version 2 of the nomenclature or the revised nomenclature to the new nomenclature, we're going to bring across a lot of unclassified terms. And some of them now have new terms in the new nomenclature. And you're going to want to do some sort of a global update in order to change them from one thing to another, so that you don't have to go back and manually edit each one of the records. I'm going to click on Exit here. Click on Setup, and go back into the Lexicon screen. Down at the, up at the top here in the upper right-hand corner, there's a button for View Unclassified Object Names. Because I'm using the evaluation copy of the software, I don't have very many unclassified object names. I expect most of our clients will have a ton of unclassified object names. And we've tried to build in an easy way for you to deal with those unclassified object names. For instance, if you have an archival series, and that's a good object name for you, even though it's not in the Nomenclature 3.0, you'll have two choices here. If you have it, you have two choices. One is, yes, I want to catalog it in the new nomenclature. I want to classify it in the new nomenclature by adding it as a primary, secondary, or tertiary term. That would be the same as that last procedure we went through to create the air ratchet. This would be just creating the archival series into the nomenclature. The other option is to select a different name from the lexicon. And the beauty of doing it from here, instead of editing each and every record, is when you assign archival series to something else, and I'm just going to pick something silly here, as an actuator, when you do this, it's going to select each one, it's going to go and change each one of those records, turning all of your archival series into an actuator. In this case, there's only one record in the eval, so it's done, and that is now missing from my list of unclassified object names because I no longer have anything called archival series in my collection. So be careful with that. If you misname something, like let's say you have 1,000,000 photographic prints, so print, comma, space, photographic, and you turn an actuator into a photographic print, there's not going to be an immediate undo button because that would undo all of your other prints as well. So, all right, so that is going to do a mass update or clean up these unclassified object names. If you decide that the Nomenclature 2.0 was better suited for your collection, or the modifications that you made to it, you didn't want to redo that work now, at the point where you wanted to go back to Nomenclature 2, you click on Setup, go to System Parameters, and change it to Nomenclature 2.0. When you do this, you'll have to re-index in order to get back to the place where you'll see the blue screen with the appropriate terms. All right, I see a number of people that are starting to type in their questions here. Diana asks, will this webinar also be available on the website? Diana, it certainly will. I do have to go through some post-processing with it, which can take sometimes a couple of hours, but sometimes it takes a couple of days for me to get around to those couple of hours. So it should be up after the holiday weekend here, if not before. Pam asks, does it matter whether you use upper or lowercase letters? We like the idea of being really consistent here, Pam. It's not 100% necessary in order to find the items that you didn't capitalize, but the standard for the nomenclature is that each word gets capitalized, and that so it print comma space photographic, both P's would be capitalized. best to select the things out of the lexicon so that you don't even have to worry about it, rather than manually typing them in if possible. Question was, can one computer do the reindex from 2 to 3 if the data is on the server? Lynn, any one computer can do the reindex, but no one else can be in PastPerfect when the reindex happens. So you'll have to bounce everyone out of the software first and then do your reindex. Lynn asks, why did you not use flashlight as the primary object name instead of souvenir? That's a great question. We don't actually assign primary object names, and I don't want to get too confused here, but we have 3 fields for object names: object name 1, object name 2, and object name 3. And then as far as primary, secondary, and tertiary go, that really defines the classification level. So you could say that object name 1 is sort of the most important name. If you had to pick one, that's what you would pick. And I think that's a good rule of thumb to go by. That if you think, all right, 50% of the time I expect people would look for this as a flashlight first, then yes, I would make that object name 1 flashlight. And then object name 2, if next it's going to be a souvenir, because the fact that it's a keychain is almost minor. And for another organization who totally, their collection is based on keychains, it might be totally the opposite, that they might feel that the keychain is the most important part. So great question, and I do think that there is an organization level there, but be careful of your use of primary versus secondary terms, or I'm sorry, primary versus object name 1. Is there a way to print out a list of unclassified object names? Great question, Tom. Let me show you where that's at. I think I'm in Nomenclature 2 now, but if I go to Reports and then Lexicon, once I'm in Reports and Lexicon, there is a need to classify. And if I run that report, it will give me a listing of all of the items that need to be classified. It's easiest to see them, though, digitally by going to Setup, or visually by going to Setup and then Lexicon. In Nomenclature, this is Nomenclature 2.0 we're looking at now. You would go to Unclassifiable Artifacts, Need to Classify. And in Nomenclature 3, it was that other button that I had up around this area of the screen, or I don't know if you can see that or not. I'll switch back so we can see it. So when you're in Nomenclature 3 to see that list, it's View Unclassifiable View Unclassified Artifact or Object Names. Under Reports is where you can print the report, which is what you asked. The question came in: why do you when you change back from Nomenclature 3.0 to 2.0, do you lose the 3 different object names? The answer is no. You can't view them any longer, but they're still in your database. Those object name fields are still populated. They're just not seen on the screen. So if you do switch back to Nomenclature 2 after doing some work, those items will still be called that, but your ability to research and display that information will be limited. Mary, I think what you're asking is if you go into the nomenclature and put in a term that's being used in your catalog but isn't classified, when you add that term to the nomenclature, the lexicon, it will automatically make the connection to classify those items. So for instance, if we would have had 20 air ratchets in our collection that were named air ratchet or ratchet, space air, if we would have had 20 of those in our collection but they were all unclassified, at the point where I added an air ratchet to my nomenclature, all of them would magically get classified correctly. can these 3.0 items be used in 2.0? I forget what the number was. You can look back at that other webinar to see what the actual number of new terms was for the new nomenclature. It was on the order of like 17,000 versus 13,000 terms between the two. Those terms are classified out in a whole different structure, so that it's not like those terms were reused and put back into the old structure. So there's really a very limited ability to do anything automatically with moving between nomenclature 3 terms in nomenclature 2 structure. I don't know of anyone who's even tried to do it. I would caution you against trying to do it because the two concepts are very dissimilar. That you've got in nomenclature 2, you would have photographic prints or print, comma, space, photographic in 2 different places, documentary artifact as well as art. In nomenclature 3, that's absolutely against the rules. You can't have the same name in 2 different places. So be careful thinking about nomenclature 3 terms in nomenclature 2.0 and vice versa. All right, so I am through the questions. For those of you who are still here, thank you very, very much for coming. If there's other questions that you have that come up, please feel free to send me an email. I'll be happy to talk to you about it. I'm not an expert on the subject matter of the nomenclature, so I probably can't help you actually identify your items, but I certainly can help you with PastPerfect when you tell me what you're trying to do. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks again for coming, and we'll be stopping the webinar.